What's up, YouTube? It's your boy RushMoreRick, and today we are reacting to serial killers that are still on the loose today. Let's tap in.
Vending machine killer. On April 30th, 1985, a 45-year-old truck driver stopped near a vending machine in Fukuyama, Japan. He was exhausted from work and was looking for an energy drink to help him power through the rest of the day. When he approached the vending machine, however, he noticed something surprising. A bottle of Oranaminsi energy drink was already in the pickup tray. Thinking he'd lucked down on a free drink, the truck driver wasted no time chugging it down. What he didn't know was that this would be the last drink he would ever taste. Instead of the refreshing feeling he was looking for.
This is why you don't just, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes some stuff is just too good to be true, bro. You don't want to, you know what I'm saying? You see a free drink, it's the end of your night, you think, oh, I could use this. No.
He felt something horribly wrong with his body.
And with the drinks, I'm pretty sure when you open it, it always got that indicator where it's like it pops or it fizzes or it does something where it show you like you just freshly opened it.
A bitter, burning sensation quickly spread throughout his throat, followed by an intense wave of nausea. It wasn't long before he was lying on the road in excruciating pain. He was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors discovered a lethal amount of paraquat dichloride in his system. Paraquat is an herbicide that was quite common in Japan at the time. More importantly, it's also highly toxic to humans. When ingested, it can lead to severe nausea, throat inflammation, internal chemical burns, and eventually death. This is also why it's been banned completely from over 70 countries to date. Unfortunately, despite knowing the reason for his illness, there was nothing the doctors could do to save his life. There's no antidote for the deadly chemical today, let alone back then. So, after hanging on to his life for a month, the truck driver passed away on the 30th of May, 1985. At first, investigators assumed that given the nature of his work, he might have accidentally encountered the toxic substance while on duty. However, after reviewing his haul records, they found no trace of this herbicide or anything remotely linked to it. This left them with only one conclusion: the chemical was mixed into the drink he consumed just moments before collapsing in agony. But with no leads or concrete evidence, they couldn't determine whether it was a murder,
no leads, no cameras, nothing,
or self-inflicted act.
Because like a lot of places be having cameras by vending machines, because just in case like somebody breaks in or tries to, you know, harm the vending machine, steal something, you should be able to see that.
Resulting in the case getting shelved for the time being. Now, while this might sound absurd today, you have to understand that paraquat was readily available in the country at the time. You didn't need any prescription or identification to purchase the chemical, leading to over 1,400 people using it as the poison of their choice in 1984 alone. In other words, the possibility of it being self-inflicted was just as high. However, just as the investigators were about to give up on this case completely, they received tragic news. Another person had fallen victim to the same poison after consuming Oranaminsi on the 5th of September. Then another 6 days later, and one more 2 weeks after that. By this point, it was clear that someone was deliberately poisoning vending machine drinks across Japan. This was the work of a deranged serial killer. Unfortunately,
my thing is, why are people taking free drinks? You don't. If somebody leaves something somewhere, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get blessed. I'm not saying to just completely leave it alone, but at the same time, do your due diligence, bro. If I pop open a drink of some sort and it don't do that fresh tss, or it don't that fresh, like when you open a water bottle, that fresh crack, if it does not do that, then that's a dead giveaway that drink is open. It belongs to somebody. I don't give a fuck if they bought it, took a sip, and said, I don't like it. Maybe the next person. Japan is too nice.
Additionally, this supposed killer was also extremely thorough. He didn't leave any fingerprints or DNA evidence on the drinks he tampered with, and only targeted vending machines with no CCTV cameras nearby.
Now, see, look, that answered my question. I was saying that, like, where's the cameras? But a lot of vending...
As for why his victims willingly drank the unknowingly poisoned drinks he left behind, that had to do with the buy one get one free promotion Oranaminsi was running around the time to entice younger consumers. However, since some people only wanted the one drink, they often left the second free drink near the vending machine as a gift for the next person. This was common enough that people didn't find the laced drinks suspicious and drank them without a second thought. Sadly, this method was terribly effective. By the end of the year, this mysterious vending machine killer had claimed the lives of 12 victims and had severely injured 35 more. But as I mentioned earlier, this killer was a master of hiding his tracks. He operated all across western and central Japan, as well as Tokyo, making it near impossible for investigators to pinpoint his location. The lack of evidence also made it difficult to figure out his motive. Some speculated that he was doing all this to extort money from Otsuka Pharmaceutical, the company that made Oranaminsi. This is because in 1984, a group called the Mystery Men with 21 Faces threatened to poison food products unless the companies paid them money. So some believed that the vending machine killer was a copycat and wanted something similar. However, this theory didn't last very long because Otsuka Pharmaceutical didn't receive any demands or extortion letters from the perpetrator. Additionally, the killer also began using other drinks, like the drink Real Gold and even Coca-Cola. Hiroaki Iwao, a Tokyo professor of criminal sociology, proposed a more disturbing theory regarding the killer's motives. He stated, "It is not uncommon for Japanese who live under tremendous pressure, both on the job and in overcrowded communities, to let out their frustrations by hurting someone else. The person responsible may even wait around to see who buys the poisoned drink. He or she may find this is a kind of exhilarating release from the tensions of life in Japan." But even if this was the truth, it still didn't bring investigators any closer to catching the suspect. Left with no other options, the authorities turned to the public and launched a nationwide campaign on the 27th of September. They placed signs and distributed leaflets telling people to avoid suspicious free drinks and to properly inspect the cap seals on their beverages before consumption.
Exactly.
They also instructed vending machine owners to investigate their stock for any anomalies and told chemical shops to monitor their customers more closely. It's unclear how effective this campaign was, as the number of victims kept increasing even after its launch. But then something unexpected happened. On the 17th of November, the murder spree stopped completely after the death of a 17-year-old girl. She was the only female to have died from the poisoning. It's possible that the person who committed these atrocities had a moral code against harming women, though that's nothing more than a baseless speculation. Due to the complete lack of evidence, the vending machine killer was never identified, cementing this case as one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in Japanese history.
I wouldn't say chilling though. I would just say this shit could have been easily avoided if you just... I get that where I'm from, like here in America, is a little different than I guess what they have going on in Japan in terms of the hospitality and, oh, I gotta buy one get one free. I'm gonna take the drink and then I'm gonna leave the next one for the next person out of kindness. I get that, but at the same time, you gotta do your own due diligence as a person. If a drink is open, it's a good chance that you should not be drinking it because it could be poison. That other person who drunk off it could have contaminated. They could have had some type of mouthly germ, mouthly disease, something. You never know. You never know. So why not just be safe? And
Little Rock serial stabber. On April 11, 2021, the Little Rock Police Department received a distress call from South Pulaski Street regarding a potential homicide. When they arrived at the scene, they found a middle-aged woman lying on the street with stab wounds all over her body. This woman turned out to be 41-year-old Deborah Walker. She was homeless at the time and was living on the streets when this incident happened. She was quickly taken to the hospital where medical staff discovered that she had been stabbed at least 15 times. Despite lying on the street, bleeding for what may have been hours, she miraculously survived and managed to regain consciousness the same day. Investigators also visited her in the hospital to gather any information she could provide about her attacker. Unfortunately, she was attacked somewhere between 1 and 4 a.m. It was still dark outside, and all that she saw was that her attacker was a tall, African-American male with a slender build. Now, in most other similar cases, such limited information would hardly be enough to generate any leads. But in this instance, the description Deborah provided left the investigators in disbelief. That's because her attacker's profile closely matched the perpetrator of another incident that took place about 8 months earlier in the surrounding area. The victim of that incident was 64-year-old Larry Eugene McChristian. He was living in Little Rock with his daughter Sarah, who was on probation at the time. On the 20th of August 2020, he had a medical emergency and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. He was discharged from the hospital the next morning. However, when the hospital staff tried to contact Sarah so she could pick him up, she wasn't answering her phone. So they gave Larry the information about a nearby homeless shelter and a bus token to get there. Later that day, Sarah came to the hospital looking for her father, only to learn that he'd been discharged hours ago. She then reached out to the homeless facility Larry was told about, but they didn't know anything about his whereabouts either. The only option she had was to file a missing persons report and wait for the police to find Larry. 2 days later, on the 24th of August, Sarah received the call she was waiting for. Tragically, it wasn't the news she had hoped for. According to the official report, the Little Rock Police Department found Larry's body on South Gaines Street at around 2 a.m. They identified him by the hospital discharge papers he had on him. More importantly, he had multiple stab wounds on his body and was unfortunately already dead by the time the police arrived. His death was declared a homicide, and the investigators began looking for clues almost immediately. This proved quite impossible at first, since there were no witnesses and there wasn't anything that could be used as evidence at the crime scene. However, after inspecting the surrounding houses, they had a major breakthrough. The CCTV camera outside a nearby house had captured the suspect walking down the street when suddenly he spots Larry and begins walking towards him. After committing the crime, he tries leaving the area only to stop, go back, and stab Larry one last time before fleeing. As mentioned earlier, this man matched the profile Deborah gave to the police, leading investigators to believe she was attacked by the same person. While looking into older cases, the
African American, tall, slender build. To me, it doesn't look. He looked like a short, chubbyish. Like, I don't see like a tall, slender man. Like, I don't see.
Was attacked by the same person. While looking into older cases, they also connected the same killer to another murder that happened in the area on September 23, 2020. The victim of this incident was 62-year-old Jeff Welch, another homeless man who was living in an abandoned home. On the morning of that day, Jeff's friend found him on the porch of his house with a stab wound on his neck. By this point, the investigators knew they were dealing with a deranged serial killer. However, just as they uncovered the connection between the three attacks, another tragedy unfolded. On April 12, 2023, a day after the attack on Deborah Walker, another one of his victims was found on the Wright Avenue overpass. The only thing in common with these 4 attacks was that they all involved homeless individuals, and they all happened between 1 and 4 a.m. There seemed to be no clear pattern on how the perpetrator selected his targets. This left the Little Rock community terrified to leave their homes, fearing they might become the next victim of the serial killer on the loose. After realizing the potential danger of the situation, LRPD began spreading awareness about the man who is now being referred to as the Little Rock Slasher. They also turned to the public awareness about the man.
Suspect description: adult, possible black, male, over 6 feet tall. Did that look like a black male over 6 feet tall? Obviously, we don't know the skin color or the race of the guy, but then he didn't even look like over 6 feet tall. He looked like 5'9", 5'10", a little chubby, short arm slasher. To me, that's what he looked like.
And who is now being referred to as the Little Rock Slasher. They also turned to the public to ask for any information they could provide on the matter, and even announced a $20,000 reward.
We also need your help. If you have seen anything suspicious or have surveillance cameras on your homes or businesses in this area, please contact us at 501.
Unfortunately, despite having CCTV footage of the suspect, the Little Rock Slasher was never caught. The case remains a mystery to this day, or at least that's what the official reports say. While researching this case, I came across an Arkansas-based blog called the Snarky Media Report. The authors of this blog did their own investigation into the slasher case, and what they found was shocking to say the least. Put simply, they claim to have found the true identity of the killer after talking to multiple locals and Deborah, who, according to their blog, already knew the identity of her attacker. They also uncovered many details about this supposed killer, including his criminal record, which reveals that he has already served 2 prison terms in Arkansas for felony convictions of domestic violence. Also, his history with drug abuse and how it made him very agitated and violent. The authors of this blog also claim to have contacted the alleged killer's previous landlord, who gave them this image of the perpetrator. Which begs the question, if they know so much about the slasher, including his legal name, why didn't they give this info to the police? That's where the case goes from creepy to bizarre, since, according to them, they've already given everything they had to the relevant authorities. Despite this, the Little Rock police didn't make any progression in catching the serial killer. Snarky Media also published a video of the Little Rock mayor and police chief refusing to...
I think this simply comes down to departments not caring enough, because the slasher is killing what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing correctly, he's killing a whole bunch of homeless people. He's killing a whole bunch of old, you know, so maybe they realize they have a situation at hand, but there's less urgency because he's not killing the affluent, he's not killing the middle class or their wealthy people or their just like regular people. He's just killing homeless people, and that don't make it okay. But at the same time, I believe that the police department, there's a lack of urgency to catch this guy.
To answer questions about the case.
He's doing their
This
dirty
seems to
work,
hint at
essentially.
something incredibly shady going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That said, there's no way for me to confirm if the authors of the snarky media blog are telling the truth. For all we know, their whole investigation is made up, and this is just some random guy who has nothing to do with the 4 attacks, and it's all a ploy to make the Little Rock Police Department look bad. Most of the information they've gathered seems to check out with what's released publicly by the authorities. The only discrepancy in their investigation is the age of the suspect. Officials believe the slasher to be young, possibly in his 20s, but the authors of this blog state that the person they found was 46 years old. Unfortunately, this is where the leads end. Whether snarky media is telling the truth or not remains uncertain. What is certain, however, is that the case remains unsolved to this day. The Little Rock slasher is likely still out there and can continue his murder spree at any moment.
Shit, don't piss him off.
Thanks to Trade Coffee for sponsoring this video. I never considered summer around at all this. Match was found chilling. Cold brew subscription. This time, he likely drank more than he could handle, resulting in him dog Patrick McNeil. On February 17, 1997, 21-year-old Patrick McNeil went out with his friends. He spent the evening out drinking with his friends in the Dapper Dog Bar in Manhattan. During this time, he likely drank more than he could handle, resulting in him throwing up in the bar's bathroom before leaving in a highly unstable and disoriented state. Patrick was then seen turning left onto 90th Street, heading in the direction of the East River. This was the last time anyone would see Patrick alive. Following this night out, Patrick vanished into thin air. Despite extensive efforts, authorities found no leads or clues to his whereabouts. That is until April 7, 1997, when Patrick's lifeless body was found in the East River 50 days after his disappearance. Duty Sergeant of the NYPD's Special Investigation Division, Kevin Gannon, was called to the scene to assist with the body's recovery and examination. Kevin had been a seasoned detective for years, and by this point there was little that could surprise him. However, the circumstances surrounding Patrick's death disturbed him to his core. The more he looked into it, the more strange the situation became. For instance, Kevin noted that Patrick's body wasn't decomposed enough to have been floating in the river for a week, let alone the past 50 days. He also found burn marks on Patrick's body, hinting at the possibility of him being restrained prior to his death. Kevin knew that something wasn't right. Unfortunately, due to the complete lack of evidence pointing to the contrary, Patrick's death was ruled as an accident. Kevin kept thinking over this feeling for the next year before coming across a case that reinforced his suspicions even further. On February 13, 1998, another body was found in the same stretch of water. This body was later identified as 22-year-old Lawrence R. Andrews, who had gone missing on New Year's Eve after celebrating the event with his friends in Times Square. After getting on the case, it didn't take long for Kevin to notice eerie similarities between the two cases, as both bodies were found within yards of each other. Both of them were also young Caucasian males and were on track to have successful careers. They both disappeared in one of the most crowded cities in the world without any trace as well. Most importantly, Kevin also found similar oddities in both cases, where the bodies were a lot less decomposed than they should have been, and there were burn marks indicating possible restraints before their death. Lawrence's case prompted Kevin to look for other similar cases across the US. He enlisted the help of fellow detective Anthony Duarte and a criminal justice professor, Dr. Lee Gilbertson. Together, they began investigating these cases, and soon a chilling pattern began to emerge. In total, they found 45 different instances of young men dying under shockingly similar circumstances as Patrick and Lawrence. Most of them went out for a night of drinking, became more intoxicated than usual, disappeared shortly after, and were later found dead in some body of water. Almost all of them were also Caucasian and on track to have a high-paying career like engineering after college. Most disturbingly, however, they also found graffiti of smiley faces near the bodies of at least a dozen different victims. This led to the three investigators creating the smiley face murder theory. According to this theory, these 45 and possibly many other deaths from the 1990s to 2010s weren't accidents in the slightest. Instead, they were murders committed by a single deranged person or an organized group of serial killers. This is the only logical explanation they could find to justify the many oddities and similarities in these incidents. That said, while this theory makes complete sense to some people, others aren't convinced one bit. Criminal profiler Pat Brown, for instance, called this theory ludicrous. She believes that the idea of connecting smiley faces, one of the most common graffiti symbols, with murders is just absurd, stating, "It's not an unusual symbol. If you look in any area 5 miles square, I bet you could find a smiley face." The FBI also completely denied this theory in a statement, reading, "The FBI has reviewed the information about the victims provided by 2 retired police detectives who have dubbed these incidents the smiley face murders and interviewed an individual who provided information to the
Y'all, I don't know if it's just me, but do y'all feel like these situations get way worse when like you give these niggas a name? Like if you give what they're doing a name, and I'm not saying it's a good name or a bad name, but if you're putting a name on it, oh, the smiley face murders, to me it would just give the killer more incentive to do more of that, because they're getting that. I believe a lot of killers do this stuff to get that recognition or to get that notoriety that they never had, whether it be positive or negative. But I feel like once you start attaching names and attaching shit that they could deem catchy in the moment, they make it worse, because then that just gives them incentive to keep going. Oh, they put a name to what I'm doing. I was just being a sick fuck. I'm just murdering these people, but now they've given me a name. Now I have to keep doing this to keep living up to the name that they gave me, like shit like that.
detectives.
It's just
To date, we have not developed any evidence to support links between these tragic deaths or any evidence substantiating the theory that these deaths are the work of a serial killer or killers. The vast majority of these instances appear to be alcohol-related drownings. However, despite these setbacks, the 3 men have stuck with their theory. They're still working on finding evidence to back their observations. That said, if their hunch is correct, it would mean one of the most wicked serial killers in American history is still at large today.
And this shit happened.
I-70 killer. Robin Fuldauer was a 26-year-old Indiana University graduate who was working at an Indianapolis Payless shoe source store near I-70 in 1992. The 8th of April was supposed to be her day off. However, just as she was getting ready to relax at home, the employee who was supposed to man the counter called in sick. Left with no other options, her manager called Robin and told her to cover the shift instead. Robin wasn't very happy about this emergency shift change, but she reluctantly agreed, arriving at the store at 10 a.m. and starting her shift as usual. Unfortunately, her day was about to get a whole lot worse. Everything seemed normal until
How the fuck like imagine waking up saying, "Oh damn, I got an off day, but my manager called me and I gotta clock in to the job, and the job is fucking payless." Oh, I'd be pissed.
p.m. when
Then you get murdered after that.
the manager called the store for a routine check. To her surprise, Robin wasn't picking up the phone. She kept trying for a few minutes before giving up and calling the Speedway gas station neighboring the shoe store. One of the gas station employees, a friend of Robin's, went to the Payless store to see if she was doing okay. However, what she found inside left her confused. The store was in slight disarray and some of the shoes were missing from the shelves. The cash register was also open and there was no money in it. Most concerning of all, there were no signs of Robin anywhere. Her friend called out Robin's name, hoping she was just in the back and would respond. But when she didn't hear anything from Robin after minutes of standing in the store, she became worried and called the police at around 2:20 p.m. The cops arrived within minutes and began searching the store for clues on Robin's whereabouts. And it wasn't long before they made a devastating discovery. They found Robin lying in the store's back office, covered in blood. It was already too late. During questioning, an employee from the store across the street claimed to have seen a strange man loitering around the shoe store a couple hours earlier. According to this employee, the man sat on the curb for about a half hour, rifling through his bag and staring at the Payless store. They then saw the same man a few minutes later trying to hitch a ride back to Interstate 465, which was about a quarter mile from the store's location. Unfortunately, they were too far away to get a good look at the man's face. Given the money stolen from the register, and without any other leads, investigators filed this as nothing more than a robbery gone wrong. However, they couldn't have been more wrong. Because just 3 days later, something similarly tragic happened to 23-year-old Patricia Smith and 32-year-old Patricia Makers. The two were working at a bridal shop in Wichita along I-70. The incident happened a little past their usual closing time as they were waiting for a customer who had a pickup. When they saw a man approaching the store, they assumed that it was the customer. However, this man drew a gun on the two after entering the store, took them to the back, and executed both with shots to the back of their heads. As the killer was leaving the store, he crossed paths with the actual customer the girls were waiting for. Without hesitation, he aimed his gun at the man and ordered him to head to the back of the store. But the customer defied his command and ran, narrowly escaping with his life. He later helped the police draw a sketch of the killer. Unfortunately, the sketch didn't provide much of a breakthrough. By this point, the authorities were certain they were dealing with a serial killer, but despite their efforts, the killer's spree continued. By May 7th, he had taken 3 more victims in small, low-traffic stores along the I-70 highway. By the time investigators managed to compile a few more sketches, the I-70 killer stopped his quest and went into hiding. That is until the I-70 killer.
It says right there, white male, 22 to 32 years old, 5'7".
Killer stopped his quest
5'9", slender.
And went into hiding. That is until 1993 when he claimed 3 more victims along I-35 in Texas. He tried to hide his identity by changing his weapon, but the investigators were quick to notice the similarities. One of his victims, Vicky Webb, also managed to miraculously survive after getting shot in the neck. If he were ever caught, Vicky's testimony would have been crucial in bringing him to justice. Though, the I-70 killer was never found, and the case went cold for nearly 3 decades. However, then, in 2021, investigators released CCTV footage of a murder that happened in 2001. The suspect in this footage looks strikingly similar to the I-70 killer sketches, potentially giving authorities the lead they need to finally catch him. It's likely only a matter of time before he runs out of places to hide and is captured. But for now, he's still out there, evading police and leaving the case unresolved. We can only hope he doesn't take any more victims in the meantime.
Well, look, that was the video. Serial killers that are still on the loose today. I don't understand how in certain times where there was cameras around, especially the New York killings, there's cameras everywhere in New York. You can't go nowhere without being on camera in New York because they think about it, especially outside of bars. I'm assuming it's a highly populated area. There's cops everywhere, whether it be in their cars, on foot. It's kind of crazy how certain people could get away with certain stuff for so long to the point where it's still unsolved years later. They said 3 decades. But anyway, that was the video. It was your boy RushMoreRick, and we just finished our reaction. Like, comment, and sub, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.